think basically the right person for the chief football officer is the guy who can turn around to a grassroots coach down the country and explain why the funding of League of Ireland academies is good news for you. And this is part of your, this is part of your work. We're all one unified organization here. I go back to doing that piece on Limerick a while ago, Limerick soccer structures and why it's failing so abjectly to provide senior international players in the men's game. And I subsequently came across a quote from a kind of a high, like a coach, kind of high profile figure within a pretty big club in Limerick. I can't remember their name, so I'm not going to say their name or the club. But they basically said, as part of their opposition to the calendar aligned season, is that the production of international players and all that, that's nothing to do with us. That we're here to provide games programs and fixtures for all the kids in Limerick that want to play football. But it's both. I mean, like your job is to provide the games so that, the one person in 50,000 who's good enough to go on to play at international level can be served. And then you can play a role and you can, bask in their success in the same way that when a GA player goes on to play county, everyone remembers their underage, their under six or under eight coach at their club. Like that's really like, I know, David, you're talking about the importance of the League of Ireland academies, and you're absolutely correct. But I think there's a perception out there that this is the most important thing over all else. Whereas I think it's the job of the chief football officer to explain that this is part of the overall else.
Part of
Yeah.
the overalls in sense, but like so say you were saying there, right? This is where my own kind of this is where I don't understand some of it, right? So we were in with Jerry McDermott in the grassroots for that grassroots presentation, and like he laid it out. This is where I'm confused, right? And Shane, you'll have a better sense of this than me. Like if you were presented from what he was presented to clubs, you're like, this makes perfect sense in terms of the aligned calendar and how they want football to be played. It's not as if they're trying to ram through this and say, well, we're playing all these games and all these leagues. They want to change how football is structured and even the thought process behind it to be as flexible as possible. That's what they're trying to do here with the FAI. This is where I'm so confused with the grassroots side of stuff and where clubs are at. And like I spoke to clubs and they're saying, we don't want to develop players who are going to go on and be professionals. We just want to have lads coming into our club. Now, some of these clubs have also extended themselves financially, which I totally understand, and they're thinking we're going to lose players. But that's a different matter. I just don't understand how you can say as a club, but it's not our job to develop players. It
But why
fucking
is that
is.
different?
It is like this is where football needs to actually have 100%. Like if you were in that presentation with Jerry McDermott and it was presented as I was told it was, you could not come away from that thinking we're being force fed something here that is totally impossible to do. We have to be willing to do it. And at the same time, there are clubs saying, well, we want leadership from the FAI. This is what it was.
Yeah.
This is why I'm so confused now as to why from the grassroots side of things now clubs like, well, we can't do this. This isn't what we're going to be doing because it's not what we've done in the past. I just find
Because
that totally bizarre.
but you just threw out the sentence. You completely glossed over the sentence. But we're going to lose players, but that's a different matter. How is it a different matter? That's the whole thing. All the clubs are going to lose a massive amount of players.
But no, that's only an assumption at the moment, isn't it? So
It's
some players,
it's an assumption based on 50 years of
right.
knowing what happens.
Okay, so then this is another aspect to it, right? So if you lose players at a certain age, maybe I don't know, say what age are we talking here? Like 9 or 10 years of age, where players will say, "Well, I want to play this sport instead, or I'm going to play that sport instead." Right. Well, first of all, like, how do you know that 100% is definitely going to happen? But also, is it not a case of, well, the kids who want to play football will play football. They'll continue on. Like this is what I'm saying. I don't
No.
understand why. And I'm saying I don't understand because this is where it feeds into what Gavin and yourself, Shane, is saying. This will be the job of the CFO. If you're going to actually take football seriously, development in this country, at a certain point, you do actually have to focus purely on the people who want to play. And if a kid at 13 or 14 decides that they don't want to play, and this is the pathway that's being laid on to become a professional footballer, for those who are capable of doing it, well, then so be it.
So in my area, no. The kids who want to play football won't be allowed to play football.
Won't be allowed.
Nope.
Well, that's different than not wanting to. They're not being allowed. Why would they not be allowed?
because almost every kid I know is more obsessed with football than with GAA at 8 or 9 years of age. Almost every kid I know. They all collect the Premier League trading cards. They all play football the whole way through their lunchtime breaks, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But if daddy is steeped in GAA culture and is a former club hero as a player, there is no way daddy will allow the young fella to go to the soccer match on Thursday night rather than
that's a parental issue, though. That's a parental issue. That's nothing to do with the FAI.
But it's a real issue. I don't care whose issue it is. I'm just telling you, it's the reality. If we have a club game, a club soccer match that clashes with a club GAA match, we will lose numbers because the kids will be made to go to the club GAA match by their parents.
But you got to balance it up, right? I mean, okay, you might lose players, but is it better than losing matches during the winter because the weather's shit? Like, at some point, like, and also, summer soccer is happening in some counties across the country, and the sky hasn't fallen in. Like, clubs can get together from different codes to work out schedules that work, and if they're not willing to do that, then I think just Irish football just has to put its chest out and say, here's a very clear fixtures, training nights. This is when all this is going to happen. You can plan your lives around this, and if there's a clash, we're just going to offer you a better experience. And like, maybe you lose players, like, but you lose.
What else are you going to lose?
Will you lose so many that the club will fold? I don't know. I feel like that's hysterical, and it's also like, if you don't want
it's not hysterical in our club's case. It's absolutely not hysterical.
You think the club will? You think the club will fold if we move to an aligned calendar? Which, by the way, does not necessarily mean summer soccer. It's a registration period from which they can leave the summer months blank if they want and organize blitzes and have some kind of football on hard pitches and beneath the sunshine for the kids who aren't away on holidays.
Explain to me how the league season runs under this. I've heard this stupid argument so many times. Explain to me how a league season runs based on this new calendar season.
Well, it's at the league's discretion, is my understanding.
Well, okay, so you tell me how you would run.
You can run it from February to May.
It's to be
take
filled
a summer break and come back.
This is what's happening at the moment where clubs and leagues are going through and actually filling in the calendar themselves. This is again one of the misconceptions that it's like, well, the FA are saying, and again, it goes back, they're trying to change it now. Well, you play your league, you play your cup, you play this, you play that, and it's all leagues, blah blah. That's changing. The FA want to get rid of that level of even development of understanding of what football is, and that's what it seems to be. It's like they're going through it, and as it was shown to me and to a group of journalists, and it has been shown to everyone involved in football, and it's beginning to be done. They're literally saying, you've got the full year here, figure out, and this is where it's not going to be one size fits all in every single county and every single league. Go through it and fill out what suits you. Here.
So what suits you is you play half a league, then you take 2 months off, and then you play the second half.
Well, no, it's not. It's not even so much taking 2 months off. You could be doing other things within football in terms of training sessions being put on with clubs, as you're saying, games, different levels of stuff being organised, smaller sided games. Like, genuinely, I came out of it and was like, this is just what makes total sense. If you're someone who's involved in football, be it a player or a coach, you're getting a variety of stuff put on for you here, where you're not just, right, we have this league and we have a cup, Jesus, we'll train, we'll do it. Like, there's a mix. Like, there's genuinely a really good mix. And this is part of the thing where, and like, people listening to this will probably hear frustration in all our voices from this, because you're like, in my mind, I came away from this saying, this is something 100% people, if you're involved in football, is to worth giving it a shot at, because as we know, it's how can you play the most amount of football in the best type of environment in terms of throughout the year. And it just seems so obvious. And then tying that in with the actual plan for, and hopefully what will be the plan in terms of with the academy system. This is where I'm saying to be the academy system, where those players then who are playing grassroots football and emerge, like, it just seems so basically clear in my mind. I'm looking at this and I don't understand how other people can't see the same.
It seems to be because you're only willing to listen to one side of the argument. Have you listened to Brian O'Reilly with Raf Diallo?
But I'm not saying about not listening to the other side of the argument. I'm just thinking, if you're from football, if you're looking at this from a football point of view, you kind of have to look at it and say, well, what's best for football here?
No, you hold on. You're looking at what's best for Dublin football, David.
Well, no, I'm not at all.
Absolutely. 100%. Have you listened to Brian O'Reilly from the Carlow League?
GAA is pretty big in Dublin as well. So is rugby. Like, I'm not at all like.
Have you listened to Brian O'Reilly from the Carlow League speak to Raf Diallo on the podcast?
No.
What is this? What is this podcast? I didn't know there were other football podcasts. I have to say.
Like, you would listen to him and you would say exactly what you're saying to me about Jerry McDermott. Everything he says makes complete and utter sense. And how can anybody with any level of intelligence not understand the issue? So he makes the exact counter argument, every bit as eloquently and every bit as plausibly as Jerry does. Like, you hardly think that anybody who's against calendar football just hasn't put any thought to it and is just digging their heels in and hasn't thought about this deeply as to whether it can work or not. Of course they have. Why is there so many people all over Ireland steeped in the game who know their locality, their local scene, inside out? Why would they be saying this is not workable if they think it's if it's workable? Think about it, lads. You know, like, where do you think the counter argument is coming from?
Well, I mean, there's a perception that part of it is...
But the counter argument is what though? What is their counter argument in a nutshell?
The counter argument is that if the kids are asked, and by the way, let's go on to the coaches. I have no idea how I would manage to continue coaching at my local club if this calendar season came in. And because I'm employed in one and not in the other, that means I'm going to have to walk away from coaching kids football. Like, this is going to absolutely kill me. This is going to break my heart. And almost nearly every coach in my area is coaching across both codes. And if they all find themselves in the same position I do, they're coaching the teams.
So Shane, test this thesis for me. Would you agree that the current status quo is not working, but the alternative proposed won't work either? That sounds kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I've heard this. The way we're currently doing it.
Then are we not fucked? Like, I mean, in all fairness.
The way we're currently doing it isn't working is kind of like, so we need to try something else. That's like saying, 2 + 2 = 5. Well, that's not right. So let's say 2 + 2 = 6. Like, just another way of doing it doesn't mean it's going to be better.
But then how will 2 + 2 ever equal 4? Or are we doomed? Are we doomed to, in David's phrase, never really take football seriously here?
No,
but is the simplest answer always not just, well, do what's going to be better for your sport? I understand. Listen, I understand that totally, but that's what I'm saying. So, like,
on what we think is going to be better for the sport.
Like, I
keep saying it. Like, I could say with a fair level of certainty that you wouldn't have had Shane Long, you wouldn't have had Seamus Coleman, you wouldn't have had Kevin Doyle, 3 of the most impactful people on Irish football over their period of time. Like, are these the people we want to be pushing away?
Well, like, who else has come out of Donegal? Who else has come out of Donegal apart from Seamus Coleman? So it's like in terms of player production at elite level, Packy Bonner, and then Seamus Coleman. Since Coleman, it's a black spot, Waterford's another black spot. Limerick's another black spot. So, like, you can use your survivorship bias and say, well, look at the great player we produced and we wouldn't have produced him otherwise. But you can equally ask the opposite question. Who else might we have produced had the calendar and the games program embraced the summer weather and given more games to more people? This is what, when I said earlier on that I think whoever replaces Canham is doing the impossible job, I kind of feel like this debate has kind of summed it up.
Well, where's all the players coming out of these counties that have gone to summer football a long time ago?
Again, that's a fair. It's a fair.
But no,
point.
but that's
where are they, David?
But no, but this is what we're talking about. We haven't been properly developing players over the last while. Now Brexit has changed. This goes back to the whole point, and now it's League of Ireland clubs that the emphasis is on to actually develop players. That's what I'm saying. So, like, that's what's changing here over the last number of years. No, I would say it's changing. Obviously, the underage academies have been there for the last few years, but you've seen it. Like, I know you tweeted out about what was it, the under 15 squad recently. What was it, 11? Basically, the starting 11 from Rovers were in the under 15s. And what's the issue? Like, just on a couple of messages that I would have sent to people on that around it, like, I don't think there was a huge amount of surprised. There was like if Anthony was like, well, yeah, there could have been a couple from maybe from Balls or a couple from Pats who could have come in, but elsewhere it wasn't really like outrage at that. That's again is the issue. Like I'm saying, is that like this is what's going to be changing now, and that's why something else has to change in terms of
Who are you
actually
talking to?
focusing it. Well, sometimes you speak to people, Shane sources, and the reason they speak to you is because you don't tell people who you're speaking to all the time. That's just nature of Anton.
You get
But
what
like,
I'm hinting. You get what I'm hinting at here.
oh,
I'm
you were
not
saying
too
like,
sure. I'm not too sure many of the people you were talking to were outside of Dublin. Check the replies to my tweet. There was lots of outrage.
About what was the outrage coming from in terms of your tweet on Twitter from? I'm just saying people I spoke to who were outside of Dublin for that. The outrage they had wasn't because of the people who were playing; it was because of the circumstances and because of the environment that's still there in Irish football. It's not because of the under 15 squad that was picked. It's because they want to see Irish football being taken more seriously at that level and more of a focus on it and driving that. And that's where a lot of the outrage from people I've been speaking to who,
So they were
believe it or not,
concerned.
are outside the pale. I do sometimes dilute my accent, and if I'm sending voice notes, I throw on the elocution lessons that my man and dad paid for that went out the window in second year. But yeah, like this genuinely like I'm not just saying like it's not a Dublin thing here at all. It really isn't. I'm going off what people are saying in the FAO. I'm going off what people are saying in different clubs. Like going off what people are saying in different parts of the country. Like you have to treat football now like a business. That's what it is. League of Ireland is it's gonna actually change a little bit. We're gonna see that, and like that's where you can't have your cake and eat it anymore, in my opinion. As like, well, what do you want is the best for development of Irish football and players. You do have to actually, and again,
You treat
kids are still going to enjoy playing football. That's not
you
going to
treat the
change. But
you
at a
treat
certain
the
age, you have to have the path in place for them and know exactly what's needed for them to become those who are capable of doing it, to become professional footballers within the League of Ireland and hopefully go on and further afield. That's
treat
now.
the
I
you
100%,
treat
I
the
100% agree. I just don't think that needs to mean calendar football.
you treat the upper end of it like a business. I mean, okay, you treat the obviously professional League of Ireland first teams and the academies as professional entities, but you still need a very strong grassroots program that will equip players to go into academies, but most importantly, provide a place for them to continue playing football if they drop out of it. That provides an enjoyable environment with a strong games program, and then to obviously catch late developers. I mean, the League of Ireland. While we talk about the importance of the academies, I kind of repeat myself. Like we won't really maximize our talent base here if we don't have strong kind of grassroots clubs and underage clubs, and even in certain circumstances, adult amateur clubs, who are, thriving in their own way as well. Like the whole thing needs to be massively rebooted. Shane, I found your tweet was very interesting. I found it very unsurprising. I'm not surprised that Shamrock Rovers are dominating underage national teams. This is not because selectors have an inbuilt bias toward Dublin, in my view. That's, Roy Keane will tell you that was his issue back in the day in the 1980s and early 1990s, and that is a chip on his shoulder that really did us well down the years. It really continued to drive him, and
Can I ask
maybe
you
still does to
on
this
that,
day.
Gav? On this is I don't mean to cut across you, but the Kane thing, right? This is just another case. Kane again, right? And this is mad now. We're even bringing this up now. It's fucking many years ago, 30 or 40 years. But he kept on going because he wanted to be a footballer. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't as if he was nearly lost to hurling or Gaelic football. Like he had the drive from an early age, and this is no matter what we think about it. Like don't get me wrong, I grew up playing football, wanting to be a footballer. Got to an age, realized not going to be a footballer. Didn't give up playing football, whatever. But that's because I loved playing football. But like how many times do you hear any story of all the best players who get to a certain level, if it's football or if it's I don't know any sport, basketball, they all talk. It's almost as if it's like part of their journey of the sacrifice they've had and the desire they've had, the dedication they've had to actually excel in their field. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's a hurler or a Gaelic footballer, like they would have been making sacrifices from such a young age. I just think you're only going to get the very, very, very best of even those people by actually properly investing in them. Do you know
Oh
what I mean?
yeah, like
Like,
sorry, we'll
and
always
like
we'll
that's
for,
that
like
pain and the agony is almost part of their story. So you can't
I
just
I know,
ignore
but you
that.
have to make it easier. Like, I mean, people will look at the fee paid for Mason Melia and the incipient fee that's going to be paid for Victor at Shamrock Rovers, and will point to it as a successful system. But it's not. Like the very best players will always emerge, regardless of where they are,
Yeah.
because of their talent and because of their internal drive and because of their family sacrifices. No more than like Keane becoming a professional footballer from Ireland, having not been in Dublin, is a kind of a miracle. Like, and it's still true today as it was previously. And this is why I found your tweet so interesting, Shane. Is that if you want to be a professional footballer from Ireland, the odds are slim. If you're born outside of Dublin and not playing in the DDSL as a kid, they're they're much more slim by orders of magnitude. It's way too hard to get. Like the DDSL is kind of providing good games program at a high level. I mean, an under 14 in the DDSL plays around twice as many games in a season as is equivalent from Limerick. Like, at that age, we're playing twice as much. That's crazy. Like, I mean,
One
and
thing I
this
didn't
is
check
why, and
out.
this is one big issue I think that we're going to run into in years to come, that we're having a similar talk about like Leinster rugby dominating the RFU. I mean, realistically, what's going to happen is that it's a handful of Dublin clubs and League of Ireland academies who are going to dominate underage teams we see already, and then potentially the senior team. Although, if you're getting picked for, like, look at squad lists from under 15, 16, 17s, even 19s, they're generally a poor indicator as to who's going to be in the senior team. But I do think what Shane has kind of articulated very well there, the uncertainty, anxiety, and anger and opposition to the calendar season. And that's, like Shane is kind of alighting on a bit of a kind of rural urban divide there. And Italia 90, like the great miracle of Italia 90 was to popularize the game outside of urban centers and like the old kind of garrison game towns across Ireland. The structures have not done enough to help players produce there. And then, as at the moment, if all happens is that we're investing in League of Ireland academies with nothing else to bring up the grassroots and the amateur element of the games, I think you'll still get a massive Dublin tilt. And I still think, unless you're willing to drive hours to training at a League of Ireland academy or a Dublin club from the country, or else willing to relocate, I think that Dublin dominance will remain the same, and it's not a good. I mean, it's great for Dublin. It's not great for the game as a whole across the country.
Yeah, and listen, I absolutely know this. Bear in mind here, you're talking to somebody whose younger brother signed for Belvedere at 11 years of age and played in the DDSL for 2 consecutive seasons, won 2 DDSL titles playing in goal for Belvedere before being replaced, before deciding to come back down the country. At which point, by the way, he was replaced by Josh Keeley, who we've seen what Josh goes on to do. Like, there's no. When I threw up that tweet, I was genuinely throwing it up as something that I expected Dublin dominance. I expected Shamrock Rovers Pat's dominance. I was shocked by the dominance being that heavy. For 11 players from one club to make it, that was what caught my eye. And I was like, geez, if I find this interesting, other people might find it interesting. That's why I threw it up. I wasn't necessarily trying to make any particular point around Shamrock Rovers or around Dublin in general. Again, it has always been that way. One of the replies under my tweet was from a guy called Peter Shaw. Peter Shaw played for me in the Kilkenny District League and made Irish home-based squads as a young fella. And as he said in his tweet, he was the absolute rarity. So he was, even back then. And that's what, he's 31-ish now, I'd say. So you're talking 17 years ago. It was the absolute rarest of the rare that somebody from outside of Dublin made an Irish squad. It's kind of always been the way it has been. It doesn't, that side of it, I don't really see that side of it feeding into my calendar football argument. So I don't. My calendar football argument is based purely on the knowledge I have of what is happening on the ground and my fears for, like you said, Gavin, will the club fold? No, the club probably won't fold, but we will have to go to every second year. We won't be able to feel that every year. So if you're 11, you'll play with the under 12s, and the 12s will play with the under 12s. If you're 13, you'll play with the under 14s, and the 14s will play with the under 14s. That would probably be the only way in which we'll still be able to have enough numbers to put out teams if they're clashing on a regular basis with GEA training or GEA matches. Again, that's not a sob story. That's just reality. That's all I'm saying here is the reality of the situation. Equally, as I've said, my massive concern is the coaches. I'm not really sure where the coaches are going to come out of, because it's the same group of us locally that are coaching the hurling and Gaelic football team as that are coaching the soccer team. So I'm not really, and at the moment, our Go Games program in the GA lasts 6 months pretty much, and our football program our soccer football program at the Kenny District League lasts 6 months. That's roughly, and we're all kind of aligned, and that's what we all do. We all coach two to three times a week for 6 months, and then we coach the other for 2 to 3 times a week for 6 months. If we now have to be out 6 to 7 nights a week for the same overlapping period, how do we do this? I don't know. And then the last bit that we haven't really touched on, I hear anybody in the FAI say one more time that this was democratically voted in, I'm going to fucking strangle somebody. Swear to God. It is
57% majority. 57% majority.
The greatest lie
endorsed unanimously by the board, who represent all elements of the game. That's democratic. You can't call that a lie.
It's a joke. In what other areas of life do you see people who have doesn't have any bearing on them getting a vote on something that
the board had a vote on it and they unanimously endorsed it?
I'm not talking about the board. Boards are they're a law unto themselves. I don't even understand.
That's democracy. But that's democracy, though. Like, you elect people to represent
democracy
you.
Is not.
And the people representing them and voted for it and endorsed it.
Democracy is not letting League of Ireland clubs vote on whether grassroots football should be played during the summer or not. Absolutely not, Gavin. And stop anybody saying it is.
57% is hardly more than just League of Ireland. I mean, that's more than just League of Ireland clubs.
It's 15%. 85% of grassroots football voted against it.
Is it also not the issue? Sorry, I know what you're saying about the League of
Ireland
clubs voting on it, but the League of Ireland clubs were actually, the League of Ireland clubs voted together on it. That's what I'm saying. That's what they're organised on it. But there'd be times where grassroots would have votes on elements of the game that wouldn't necessarily,
When?
But no, you're saying it has nothing to do with it. But does it not have anything to do with it? If you can't say, well, the League of Ireland is part of Irish football, yet shouldn't have a say in a major part of how Irish football is going to be done.
Hold on. We seem to. So explain to me. You've completely skipped. So explain to me. 85% of grassroots clubs have voted against this. So how does it? Explain to me how that's okay. Explain to me how 85% can vote against something that ends up happening. Explain it to me.
Because it wasn't just solely on that, was it? Do you know what I mean? It's not as if it wasn't. If the vote was just purely on that, but it wasn't. It was a vote in the General Assembly, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? That's like Irish football, and then the vote was carried by the board, which Gavin has already mentioned, who represent all strands of the game, and we're on board with it.
Did 85% of the people directly affected by this decision vote against it?
Did 85? Well, repeat that. Sorry. Did
85%? 85% of the people directly affected by this decision, as in them having to change their calendar, vote.
So it should have only been. What you're saying. Sorry. What you're saying is, so for this issue, it should have only been people involved in grassroots who had the vote on it.
Yep.
And so I mean, the FAI will say that this came in the pathways plan, which is a consequence of all this consultation. Like David Carell said multiple times, his inner Malcolm Gladwell, 16,000 hours of consultation which led to this. This is not the FAI's idea. This is Irish football's idea to align the calendars, play more during the summer in the better weather. The board, who are elected to vote, represent all interests. They all unanimously voted for it. And then it went to the General Assembly, and admittedly it passed by a slim majority of 57%. And admittedly, as you put it there, I can't argue with those figures, but I'm just pointing the FAI's point on this is that this is democratic. So when you're accusing them of a lie, I feel the need to balance it up there.
No. I've played this game a million times, lads, where you go and consult on something when everybody knows what the outcome is going to be before the consultation process begins. Like, no, absolutely not. They knew what they wanted. They knew what the outcome was going to be. They had to be seen to be hearing the voices. It's the same reason that you hear Ger McDermott saying at the moment that the leagues are willing to engage. Leagues are willing to sit down with the league, or sorry, the FAI are willing to sit down with the league and have discussion around what is the best path for that league. But we're also completely unwilling to change our stance. Hold on. It comes to a table for negotiation where one side has already said that the outcome is already dictated. Explain this to me. Why would any league engage with the FAI when the FAI are saying that they have already stated they are not willing to step back from the decision they've made?
I feel like we're going around in circles a little bit on this, and this is even to the wider point. And this is probably what maybe even some of the messaging from the FAI should have been better. It's not as if they come now and said this is how every team, every league is going to play. They're all playing in the summer now instead. That's not the case. Like,
no, I never said it was the case. I said they're still dictating that the calendar football is going to come in. So if a league who doesn't want the calendar,
they're governing body, like, so like they have, like, this is, and again, this is what was going in about, like, they're saying, well, we need people in the FAI to actually be leaders here and actually take the decisions and put forward a plan. This is what people have wanted. They've asked for it, and I know what you're saying. Like, some people are not happy with it, but you can't then say, well, we're not happy with the leadership you've taken.
Who asked them for this leadership? I keep hearing this line as well, and I find this one a bit of a head scratcher as well.
Everyone. Every single person. Every single person has said.
I think you might be confused. I think they're asking for a change of leadership. I don't think they're asking for leadership from certain people.
Shane, you proposed Jim Gavin for this role last week. Could he resolve this? I mean, as David says, that we are going around in circles now, but I feel like, as we've kind of a little microcosm there of the challenges that face the man to replace Mark Canham, I think it's an impossible job. This is why I'm fatalistic about things. I honestly
don't think it is impossible. No, Damien Duff said it's impossible. I actually don't think it is. I think it's impossible if you feel as if you can't carry it through. But it's not as if, and I'm saying this again, we're talking about, this is mad, right? But let's say, for example, and I actually made this point to someone, actually it was Jeremy Dermot, the FAI, saying get Brexit done. Like, this is the thing about it. Like, if they actually put this through, and which they should, go through with this and assess, well, what actually happens to Irish football in the next 5 years, give you an idea. This is the beauty of it, Shane, as well. You can kind of reverse some of it then and say, well, do you know what? And this is where I think a lot of people would say, hold our hands up here. What we were expecting to actually happen has not materialized in the space of a few years, and actually the drop off, and I think you'd be surprised as well. I don't think this genuinely is a Dublin thing necessarily, and the Dublin thing in regards to other counties, because it is so popular. Like, there will be naturally in grassroots, you'd imagine to be a youth. It's part of the reason why the DDSL are also one of these leagues who aren't backing it, which you can understand. But like, this is where the democracy will come back into it, and actually could say, well, do you know what? Do you know what I mean? So like, something.
Why aren't the DDSL backing it?
Well, no, they've as is the way, like, they've carried out their own kind of what was it they brought out, was it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, Gav? At the start, remember they brought out there where they had a consultation with a crowd who actually have done stuff in sport, but it wasn't as wide ranging. It was more so questions on about enjoyment of fun and all the rest of it in games like this. Do you know what I mean?
Why aren't the DDSL backing this?
Again, I don't know.
Well, I think they've articulated. I mean, they're citing the survey saying that the majority of respondents prefer the old season, and
you're doing that. But the thing is, right? Sorry, this is the thing, right? Where you're doing that, Shane, right? You're doing that but like, has what's been happening for Irish football over the last 50 years, 60 years, 70 years made the most of it?
No. So bring in Jim Gavin and let him come up with a proper plan. Don't go with this shit one that's absolutely not going to work.
Come here, you cannot. And this is a serious matter. This goes back to saying about taking Irish football seriously and actually leading forward with it. You can't just go and say, well, just throw Jim Gavin in and do something. Do you know what I mean?
I'm being a little bit flippant, but only a little bit.
This is why I can't understand. Sorry, and this is where I am getting a little bit ticking myself now, a little bit, because I'm like, everybody is in agreement that what's happened in Irish football for the last 60 years hasn't been sufficient and hasn't been making the most of the talent that's there. We get an opportunity to actually properly change things by necessity because of Brexit for underage football.
And we make
people want exactly. So like, that's where, and that's because, and listen, I haven't been involved in an actual this, and I haven't been involved working or playing for the club at grassroots level. So like this is where I have no skin in the game in terms of, well, what's best for me, blah blah blah. Like this is where I can't comprehend some of the arguments that are being made. Like that's my own like that, and that's gonna bring us back around in circles because I think we're all like that. So if we all keep repeating the same thing, what the fuck's gonna happen? Nothing's gonna change.
Yeah, we just want different change.